Heard it told a long time ago by those who've visited Cambodia. The monuments are well worth a view, so huge and grandly built in ancient time. The craftsmen Khmer are expert carving stone in motifs manifold and intricate. They urged us on, do go and see them too. But duties, business all got in the way. I had to scrap appointments, burn them all, so that this year of rat, a window loomed to go to Angkor Wat, this present time. Prince Damrong Rajanubhab travelled to Angkor in November-December 1924. He was 62 years old. He chose to call his account of the journey Nirat Nakhon Wat, where Nirat is a Pali Sanskrit word meaning loss, which became the title of a genre of Thai poetry very popular in the 19th century, in which a poet undertakes a journey and laments the separation from a lover left behind. It was later used for any poems about travel, and here, I think for the first time, for a prose work on travel too. In a preface in verse, Prince Damrong explained that he was thinking about returning with gifts. Because my friends are many, 100+, to give to all would be beyond my means. A better course, compose a Nirat ode, relating all about Cambodia for all my band of bosom friends to hear, then print and hand them out just like a gift. I think that most would find this to their taste. But all in verse would be beyond my power. As I'm not skilled at verse, it would not flow. I think I must compose in prose alone, with just a little verse to show the flag. The first printing, titled as an edition for gifting, appeared in March 1925, just 3 months after his return. The publisher asked to print again for sale. Prince Damrong made a few corrections, and the commercial edition appeared a year later and was very popular. In 1938, the Ministry of Education printed an edition for use in schools, and Prince Damrong added a small passage. The book remained constantly in print. These early editions had only a handful of illustrations. In 2002, the Prince Damrong Foundation published a new edition through the Matichon Group, including 80 photos, mostly taken by Prince Damrong's party or presented to Prince Damrong by the Résidence Supérieure. Over 20 years ago, the Pali scholar Peter Skilling had one of his pupils, Bruce Evans, translate the book into English, and recently asked me to edit and complete the work. Here it is, published by River Books on the centenary of the original journey. Prince Damrong had travelled a lot inside Siam, but rarely outside. This was his first trip after his retirement from government service a decade earlier, and was followed by a trip to Burma in 1936. Prince Damrong was accompanied by 3 of his daughters, Momjao Poon Pisamai, Patanyu, and Pillai Lekha. These 3 regularly accompanied him on his journeys. All 3 were then in their late 20s. There were then 4 attendants, Sombun Chotichit, who probably took dictation of the journal on which the book was based, Luang Suryapong, a doctor, Paya Potricha, and Det Kongsai Sin, a valet, who does not appear in this or most of the photos, probably because he was taking them. The 9th member was Professor George Coedès, recruited 5 years earlier by Prince Damrong to be chief librarian of the Capital Library, the precursor of the Thai National Library, who came as a guide. They sailed on a steamer belonging to the East Asiatic Company, which detoured from its usual route to Singapore to deliver them to Kep. The steamer was sunk by Allied bombing in 1945 and is now a famous dive site off Sattahip. They departed on 16 November 1924, landed at Kep and drove to Phnom Penh, where they spent 3 days. Then went by boat through the Tonle Sap to Siem Reap, toured Angkor for 10 days, travelled by boat and car back to Phnom Penh, took a side trip to Saigon, then returned by the same route to arrive in Bangkok on 14th of December, in total about a month. Part of the excitement for them as tourists was travelling by car. At that time, there were no roads leading out of Bangkok. Only in 1931 were roads constructed to Nonburi and Samut Pragan, each about 20 miles. The elite brought motor cars, but they were used mostly for cruising gently round the Dusit quarter of the capital, more status symbol than transport. Prince Damrong had heard that cars could be driven fast on the open roads in Cambodia, and he was a little scared at the outset and asked for the drivers to slow down. But he soon got used to the speed, and he recorded in his journal the great distances covered. Although he had retired from government for a decade, he had not lost his instincts as an administrator. In his journal, he related at some length not only the technical details of how roads were constructed in Cambodia, along with the special problems created by the climate, terrain, and bullock carts, but also he detailed the administrative arrangements and the allocation of work that lay behind this construction. At Siem Reap, the party stayed at the Hotel Angkor, situated along the moat around Angkor Wat, and run by Messagerie Fluviale, the shipping company. The hotel had around 15 rooms on a single story, and Prince Damrong described it as well appointed and comfortable with both running water and electricity. The food was not bad, but the price, he thought, was a little steep. Among other guests was an American film crew, and Prince Damrong may have appeared as an extra in the background of some early Hollywood film. A group of 4 Egyptian princesses was due to arrive as he was departing. Prince Damrong had written a lot on monuments in Siam. He started his account of Angkor. I will simply state how seeing the actual temples differed from my prior expectations. First, it was more colossal than I had expected. Second, it was more magnificent than I had expected. He was impressed. They spent 10 days visiting the monuments, ranging farthest afield to the Lole group and Bante Samre, but mostly around Angkor Wat and Angkor Thom. They travelled mostly by car, but occasionally by bullock cart. They clambered up many flights of steps. Prince Damrong wrote, if one slipped and fell, there was a good chance of breaking one's neck. One has to use both hands and feet to climb up and down the steps. In fact, one almost has to crawl up the steps and then crawl back down. He described each monument in the journal, probably dictated at the end of each day. He also summarized his impressions. Following the wisdom of the time, he argued that the Bayon was dated to the 9th century, much earlier than Angkor Wat, and had originally been Hindu, the face being Shiva. But even as he was touring round the monuments, research by Philippe Stern in Paris and Henri Parmentier at Angkor was undermining this chronology. 2 years later, Henri Marchal, who conducted Prince Damrong's party around Angkor, made excavations that confirmed a new chronology. And in 1928, Georges Coedès reread the inscriptions and gave his blessing. The Bayon dates to the reign of Jayavarman VII at the end of the 12th century, later than Angkor Wat, and the faces are the Buddha. This revised chronology still holds today, but Prince Damrong did not revise his account. He sensed that the major monuments such as Angkor Wat were memorials and reliquaries associated with the funerary traditions of kings. He realized that the crematory pavilions for Thai kings derived from the architecture of Angkor. He noted that Baksay Damrong resembled a crematory urn and asked, could it be that this tradition of placing bodies of deceased kings in urns dates back to the time of Cambodian power in Angkor Thom? He was fascinated by the changes in the religious affiliations of buildings. He argued that Angkor had first been Mahayana, then Shaivite, then Vaishnavite, and that the transitions had not been conflictual, simply shifts in beliefs. He concluded his summary. No matter what image you form from reading about the monuments, it falls far short of the experience of actually going to see them for yourself. Prince Damrong told the French that his visit was a private affair, but of course that could not be because of who he was and because the relations among Siam, Cambodia and France were so complex and fragile. Like many close neighbours, Siam and Cambodia simply have too much history. Angkor was the most advanced early culture in the region, and from there, art, architecture, dance, language, and statecraft flowed into early Siam. But when Angkor declined, Siam rose as a commercial and military power with ambitions to dominate its eastern neighbour. In 1794, a new Cambodian dynasty was installed from Bangkok, and they allowed Siam to take control of the province of Battambang, including Angkor. King Sisawat, who welcomed Prince Damrong in Phnom Penh, had been born and brought up in Bangkok, educated alongside the Siamese royals. After the French imposed a protectorate over Cambodia in 1863, Siamese influence was not immediately supplanted. But after King Sisawat came to the throne in 1904, Cambodia became effectively a French colonial territory, and France forced Siam to give up Battambang in 1907 and also Chantaburi. These events lurk in the background of Prince Damrong's account of their short stays in Phnom Penh at the beginning and end of the journey. They have several meetings with King Sisawat, a private audience, a drama performance, and a tea to allow Prince Damrong's daughters to meet their Cambodian counterparts. These affairs are rather stiff. Prince Damrong had brought along his formal dress and regalia and was careful to follow details of protocol. His exchanges with King Sisawat echo with diplomatic nicety. At the same time, Prince Damrong's account of these days constantly recalls Siamese influence over Cambodia in the recent past. He meets many people, royals, nobles, officials, monks, consorts, who speak to him in Thai, learnt during time spent in Bangkok or under Siamese administration. Several of the royal princesses have Thai mothers. He describes in great detail the royal palace of Phnom Penh, built by Sisawat's predecessor Norodom, as a close copy of the Bangkok Grand Palace, including the adjacent Wat Phra Kaew with murals of the Ramakien and an emerald Buddha. Perhaps Prince Damrong was indulging in some nostalgia, but perhaps he was also thinking of the book's main audience, the elite of Bangkok. He praises Khmer architects and craftsmen for following Thai models, but he chides them for their mistakes. The main audience hall is an imitation of an imitation, a mess. The ceremonial umbrella there is too high. In the Ramakien murals, the artwork is poor and not worth looking at. The image in Wat Phra Kaew is clearly a copy of the Emerald Buddha in Bangkok, but the colour is wrong. In the Thai play performed for their benefit, the dancing was comparable to that in Bangkok, and some of it was praiseworthy, but the female costume did not look good, as one shoulder was left bare, revealing the armpit. Perhaps Prince Damrong was telling his Bangkok audience that though Siam had nothing to rival Angkor in the ancient past, Siam was now clearly superior to its neighbour. Relations with the French were no less delicate. Both France and Britain had threatened Siam in the high colonial era. France had dislodged the Siamese from Battambang and Angkor only 17 years before this journey. The European powers had lost their enthusiasm for colonialism over the First World War, but the past remained the past. Prince Damrong stated that he had intended to simply travel round independently, but in practice, the Résidence Supérieure curated the whole trip. He hosted them at his house in Phnom Penh, provided the cars, orchestrated their tour of Phnom Penh, accompanied them part of the time in Siem Reap, attended their audiences with King Sisawat, and took them on a side trip to Mount Bogor during their return leg. Outside the capital, the party was passed on from one province's résident to another. The scholar Suzanne Carpeles, then employed by EFEO, accompanied them from their landing at Kep onwards. So did Lieutenant Gonet, an aide-de-camp. Henri Marchal, conservateur at Angkor, guided them around the monuments. There must be a large and interesting file on the trip in the colonial archives. Prince Damrong stuck to proper diplomatic protocol. He has no discussion of politics in the book, though his meetings with Cambodian royalty and officialdom are open to political interpretation. He fended off journalists who had political questions. He does not comment on colonial rule, though he showed an administrator's appreciation of some of its achievements. When asked for a title for this talk, I included raconteur because it scans well, and it would mean I have at least one French word. But Prince Damrong is not really a raconteur, a teller of tales, but rather a collector of information, a harvester of knowledge. In the course of this trip, he always asked about a whole range of subjects and recorded his findings in this book, including the recent history of the Cambodian royal family, the names of all 21 buildings in the royal palace, the royal regalia, the directory of Cambodian ecclesiastical titles and the organization of the Sangha, annual royal ceremonies, the procedure of the royal Gatin presentation, including the scripts of blessings, a list of royal decorations, the reliquaries of past kings, the history of the Royal Cambodia Theatre Troupe, the curriculum of monastic school, ranks of Cambodian princes, and a list of ministerial positions. Also in passing, he gave his own detailed description of the construction and monuments on the Phnom Penh reliquary, the techniques of administration, of road construction, the buildings of Wat Phra Kaew, the origins of the Phra Kring amulets, trade of Saigon, the story of the Bishop of Adon, the activities and finances of the Saigon Opera House, and Cambodian musical instruments. In these notes and records, there is a very clear emphasis on the history, culture, and practices of Cambodian monarchy, including its relationship to the Buddhist Sangha. I was struck by the similarity to the Khamhaigan, the testimonies taken down from Ayutthaya nobles swept away to Burma in 1767. They also deal with the history, culture, and practices of the Thai monarchy. Did Prince Damrong's choice of Nirat, loss for this work, have an extra layer of subtlety? Was he thinking, perhaps unconsciously, on the one hand of the fall of Ayutthaya and the loss of knowledge which that entailed, and on the other hand about the fragility of Asian monarchy in the context of colonialism and the coming of the modern world. What then does this book tell us about the theme of this symposium, the relationship between Prince Damrong and George Coedès? Sadly, rather little. These 7 passages are all the mentions of Coedès, other than simple travel arrangements. Prince Damrong related that Coedès offered his surmise about the reliefs on the terrace of the Leper King, and we can be sure that he offered similar surmises throughout the tour of the monuments. But Prince Damrong, in his role as a diarist, confines himself to his own descriptions and opinions. Journey to Angkor is a rare account of an Asian royal tourist confronting the ancient history of Angkor against the background of the historical complexity of Thai-Khmer relations and under the shadow of late colonial rule. Perhaps Prince Damrong's choice of Nirat for the title has more resonance than we might initially think. Perhaps there is a theme of loss, both ancient and modern, threaded through this detailed and intense account of a unique journey made a century ago.